All right, friend, welcome back to ArcheTAP. I'm super glad that you're here. We are stepping into a new 6-day window, and the sun is moving through gate 36, the darkening of the light. The name sounds ominous, as all shadows do, I know, but I want you to stay with it because what looks like darkening is often just the light changing form. This is human design time, not calendar time. So we move through these gates in 6-day chapters, and gate 36 highlights the place in all of us that meets suffering, our own, other people's, the world's. And there's a lot going on in the world right now. And the system has to decide what to do with that suffering, right? So that's not a small task. So let's break it down, slow it down. Gate 36 is called crisis in traditional human design. The darkening of the light in the I Ching. Gene key 36 moves from turbulence to humanity to compassion. It lives in Pisces, which is the sign of disillusion, empathy, and the place where boundaries between self and others get pretty thin, which already tells you something about this 6-day window and what it's going to feel like. I want to be honest with you about this gate. I think that sugarcoating it would actually do you a disservice. Plus, I'm going to tell a fun story about my family and my grandmother here in just a little bit. I feel like, again, stories just really help this makes sense of like how these archetypes really play out in our lives. This is the gate that comes for you when life decides it's time to shatter a pattern. So already you can tell it's going to be super comfortable. When something has to break open before it can be transformed, when the light gets darker before it gets clearer, and the mastery here, the thing that this gate is actually teaching us is whether you can hold a vision and sustain your emotional alignment, even when the process looks like nothing's getting done or nothing like what you expected, or better yet, even bored. That's the whole arc. Turbulence at the bottom, humanity as its opposite, and compassion at the highest level, highest vibration. And the lesson in between is don't bail before the miracle. Let's talk about the shadow. The shadow of 36 is turbulence, and the dilemma, the core stuck place, is overwhelm. I think overwhelm is a word that we can all really relate to these days. So much is changing so fast, and the patterns that were supportive to us in the past that helped us feel safe are just no longer working. So we've got to upgrade. Turbulence here isn't just external chaos. It's the emotional unrest that lives inside the body when we're in contact with fear that we haven't finished processing yet. It's anxiety without a clear object at the other end. It's reactivity that fires off before you've even thought about it, right? The last 2 gates that we have been in, so the last 12 days, we have been in the same codon ring, which is sort of a different topic, but for just the sake of this, these last 3 gates have all been very connected to each other. The thing about turbulence in this gate, it's fueled by the fear of the emotional experience itself. Not just the hard feeling, but the fear of how big the feeling might get, right? Like in all of my energy work, I have clients all the time that the kind of fear comes up of like, if I start crying, I'll never stop. That kind of fear of being swept away, the fear of what it might actually mean to let yourself feel it all the way through. So the shadow response is to close down or blow it up. Reach for something new here. Leap out of the frying pan into the fire, which is literally one of the keynotes of this gate. The unbalanced expression of this gate is someone who can't wait for timing, who leaps from opportunity to opportunity, relationship to relationship, project to project, always just before the thing could bear fruit, always just before the discomfort turned into something real. And the lesson is boredom, which sounds almost funny until you realize that boredom is what the body feels when it's sitting in the discomfort of the process, when the thing isn't done yet. The transformation isn't complete. The vision hasn't landed into form yet, and yet the nervous system starts looking for an exit. Get me GTFO. Boredom is often the last few miles of the trip before you get there, right? Nothing takes longer than the last 30 minutes of a road trip. The shadow also carries an ancestral layer, codon 36, which codes for proline, which is the same piece of amino acid that is tied to, like we've talked about in the last two, emotional resilience, tissue repair, collagen production. It's what keeps you from being emotionally rigid. Yet we have developed patterns in our bodies to hold it together under extreme stress. Generationally, this is the codon that carries survival armor. Families where emotions were dangerous, where stoicism meant staying alive, and where any kind of vulnerability was seen as a liability. Not just seen as it, but probably was it. So if you came from people who don't cry at funerals, who just pushed through, who said, it is what it is, and just kept moving along, who exploded sideways when things got too big and then acted like nothing happened. That is gate 36 in the ancestral field. That's the inherited turbulence. No one was allowed to be messy, you know? And it doesn't mean that we're broken if we carry this pattern. It means that we're built for a different set of circumstances, right? In the human design chakra system, we're talking about the emotional solar plexus, which is directly connected to the kidneys and the pancreas. The kidneys hold fear in Chinese medicine, not abstract fear, the deep visceral survival level fear that lives in your lower back and hips, that gets you ready to run if you need to. The kind that makes you feel unsupported, unsure, like the ground could shift out from underneath you at any point. The pancreas is involved in blood sugar regulation, which means it's deeply tied to how we process energy, how we sustain ourselves. It's literally about the sweetness of life and how we can ride a wave that is incredibly intense and not crash. So when gate 36 is active and the shadow is running, you might notice some lower back tension or fatigue. You might notice some blood sugar crashes, rather weird cravings, that specific flavor of emotional depletion that feels physical, because it is. 36 codes for proline, which is the amino acid behind collagen, like I stated earlier, the structural protein in connective tissue, joints, skin, blood vessels. Proline is literally what holds you together. When it's distorted epigenetically, it shows up as emotional rigidity, difficulty recovering from emotional wounds, that feeling of being scarred, not just metaphorically, but in the body's actual tissue. I want to tell you a story about my grandmother. Her name was Nancy. She was a young woman stationed with her husband here in Oklahoma City in the early 50s. Her husband, my grandpa Sheridan, was deployed to active combat in Korea. They had a baby at home, my uncle, who was under the age of 2, and she had no map for how to hold all of that emotionally, because that's not what women of that era were given, right? You held it together, you managed, you did not fall apart. So what she did to manage, what her nervous system found to manage the unbearable uncertainty that she was dealing with, was shop. She was working retail at the time, and she started stealing from her employer. Small things at first, probably. A little bit of this story is murky, but then more and more. We're not sure if she stole money also, but she did eventually get caught, and charges were going to be filed against her. So she put the baby in the car and she ran. She headed west to California. Whether that timing was coincidence or something else, I'm not sure. My grandpa was coming home from Korea right around this time that she went on the lam. And at that time, the military paid soldiers in cash. So he came back. He hears that his wife and baby are in the family car somewhere in, I don't know, Utah, Nevada. And he used every single dollar that he made in that war to get her out of trouble so that there were no charges brought, no arrest happened. He was probably furious. We don't really know because he didn't show emotion either. And we never talked about this shit. This is something my mom told me later. But he did show up. And then they just did the thing. They didn't talk about it. That's not a guess. That's the lost generation. Remortgaged the house, you paid your debt, you moved forward. You did not sit down and ask your wife, what was she so afraid of? She probably, from the outside looking in, what was normal at that time, had everything she could have ever asked for. She was probably so disconnected from herself at that point that who knows. Nancy spent the rest of her life filling her house with things, quietly, secretly accumulating. By the time that she and my grandpa both passed, their house was so full, it took a year to clean it out. The buying never stopped. It just moved indoors and into closets and into corners and out of sight. She developed Alzheimer's pretty early. She was emotionally shut down for most of her adult life. Not because she was cold. I remember her being really warm to me, but because the turbulence never had anywhere to land. And I will tell you that what she and I did together when she was watching me was shop. This is Codon 36 when it doesn't get to complete itself. That emotional scar tissue really starts to build. And then the armor that's created calcifies. The body starts to keep the score. And eventually, in her case, her brain decided that it was safer to just not remember. Nancy didn't have the language for any of this. She didn't have permission to be witnessed in her fear. She didn't have permission to be messy. You know, the mirror that was being held up to her at that time was just like probably, I'm picturing like Mad Men, like Betty, I know that was about 10 years later, but I think that the culture was still pretty similar. She didn't have a single person around her who would have said, hey, that makes sense that you're feeling that way. How can I support you? You're scared. You don't have to manage all of this alone. So she managed the only way that she knew how. And I'm telling you this because Nancy's pattern didn't die with her. It traveled. My mother has it. I have it. It's the reach for something external when the internal landscape gets too uncomfortable. Online shopping, in-store shopping, it doesn't really matter. It's the same thing. It's the same thing that Nancy was doing in Oklahoma City in 1952. That's how Codon 36 carries. Not through a story that we were told, through a body response that got encoded so early it feels like a part of my personality. The difference, the only real difference between Nancy and me is that I can see it now. I can feel the sensation in my body right before I reach for the thing, whether it's shopping or food or whatever. I can notice the thought underneath it. I'm getting better at this all the time. I don't always stop, but I'm not in the dark about it anymore. And that noticing, that is proline healing. That's where the scar tissue starts to soften, right? So this gate asks a question, where have you built armor around a wound that's actually ready to heal? It's ready to come to the surface and heal. The gift of 36 is humanity, and I want to sit with that for a second because it's easy to gloss over it. That word gets thrown around quite a bit these days. Humanity isn't soft. It isn't passive. It's not just about being kind to people. In this context, humanity is the ability to stay open when your whole system wants to close, to meet suffering, your own or someone else's, the world's right now, without shutting down, without trying to fix it or running from it. Richard Rudd, the writer of The Gene Keys, which I highly recommend his book. He's such a poet. He describes these so beautifully, says that this gift doesn't freeze, it stays open. And wow. Do you know what that actually entails? Something threatens to overwhelm you, and instead of contracting and turtling over, you breathe into it, right? You anchor in your belly. You let the turbulence move through you. Not because you're superhuman, not because You've learned, but not because you're superhuman, but because you've learned that the heart can hold a lot more than you think it can. Again, this gate is in the Ring of Divinity alongside Gene Keys 22, which is grace, and 63, which is truth, and then 37, which we haven't talked about yet, which is tenderness, which is a pretty heavy lineup. And it tells you something about what this gate is actually made up underneath all of that crisis language, right? The gift level of this gate is what happens when you stick with something long enough to become masterful at it. When you don't bail at the first sign of discomfort, right? When you let the experience complete itself. This is when transformation really becomes possible. That's when you become someone who can be present with suffering without being destroyed by it. Someone who knows in the body, not just the head, that intensity isn't the same thing as danger. Let me say that one more time. Intensity isn't the same thing as danger. Staying open is the gift, and it's not comfortable. I'm not suggesting that it is, but it is what changes things. I told that story about my grandmother. 36 carries deep ancestral memory of collective suffering, wars, famine, persecution, displacement, the kinds of experiences where closing down emotionally was literally how people survived. There's no judgment about this. It was strategy and it was brilliant at the time. But that survival armor got encoded, it got passed down. So many of us come into this life with a body that is already preloaded with emotional intention and it comes preloaded with emotional intensity equals danger, right? We haven't even had our own experiences yet to justify it. And on the karmic level, this gate often shows up in people who have lived lives of extreme emotional experience, as healers, as people who suffered, as those who held space for others at an enormous personal cost. Patterns of martyrdom, patterns of being the one who goes into the darkness so that others don't have to. The invitation in this gate is to complete that contract differently. We're not out here avoiding darkness, but we are learning that we can go into darkness and come back out. That presence doesn't require sacrificing what feels like our life in the moment. That compassion doesn't require depletion. If you feel like you've always been the one who absorbs everyone else's pain, if you've been the emotional container for people around you while you've been quietly burning inside, if you've been wondering why you feel things so intensely and then other people seem to just not, that's 36. That's the sensitivity that comes with this gate when it's activated, especially if it's activated in your line, if it's activated in your chart. And the work really isn't to stop feeling, it's to learn how to hold feeling without it holding you hostage. So this is what this might feel like over the next 6 days. First, just like last week, emotional intensity that might feel disproportionate to the thing. A situation that's maybe a 4 on the objective scale feels like an 8 or a 9 inside your nervous system. And this isn't overreaction, it is amplification. 36, amplifying the emotional field. Second, the pull to escape, to quit something, to make dramatic change, to leap. Watch that carefully. Not because change is always wrong, absolutely not, but because the impulse to blow something up during 36 is often the shadow of discomfort, not genuine guidance that you're receiving. And third, contact with other people's suffering. Someone in your life may be going through something hard and you might find yourself being asked to hold space, to witness, to just be present with something that's heavy. Again, the veil is pretty thin right here. And the question that 36 is always asking is, can you stay open? Can you stay open without getting pulled under? Fourth, the body stuff, lower back, blood sugar, sleep, fatigue that feels emotional rather than physical. We just want to pay attention to what our body is trying to tell us. And fifth is boredom, that restless, itchy feeling like something should be happening and it isn't, like you're just waiting, like the pace of things is too slow, like you need stimulation or movement or change just to feel okay. That's the gate. That's the feeling. It's designed to surface. But here's what's also possible this week. And I don't want you to miss it if you're too busy just watching for the shadow. Watch for moments of unexpected compassion for yourself or for someone else, the kind that comes out of nowhere and surprises you, where you catch yourself being genuinely soft in a place where you might have usually been defended. Watch for this sensation that something is completing, not in a dramatic way, just a quiet sense that a cycle is rounding a corner, that you stayed with something long enough for it to actually move. Try and look for your body's ability to soften, for your shoulders to drop, for you to take a big, deep breath into your belly and feel that physical state change that a deep breath will give you. That's proline doing its job. And watch for genuine moments of presence with someone else's pain. This can be really tricky. Watch where you didn't fix it, where you didn't run from it, you weren't annoyed by it, you just let someone else be human for a moment, didn't make it about you. And I think the higher move overall is to stay. Not to force yourself through gritted teeth, but to genuinely stay with the process. Try to stay curious, try to stay grounded, trusting that something is actually happening even when it doesn't look like it from the outside. And I think something really important to note here is that suffering isn't a sign that you've failed in any way. Turbulence is not a sign that you've gotten off track. I mean, think about how really the only time that we use the word turbulence is when we're flying, right? And it's like unexpected bursts of air that affect the plane, and then you immediately put your seatbelt back on and are told not to move around the cabin, right? But it's going to end. It's just a short period of time. Here's hoping. So 36 says that the darkening of the light is how certain kinds of transformation happen. It's the cocoon stage, the between stage, the stage where the old thing has dissolved, but the new thing isn't quite visible yet. And mastery here isn't just about feeling it, it's about sustaining your alignment with the vision, even when the process feels very dark. Holding the frequency of what's possible even when the present moment looks like nothing new. Creating miracles through emotional alignment is the literal mastery description of this gate. Not through force, not through willpower, through staying emotionally aligned. Being soft and open and present even when it is challenging. That's a completely different skill than pushing through. 36 doesn't respond to logic. This is emotional. You can't think your way out of emotional turbulence. You can't reason yourself into staying open when your system is in the survival mode. You can't willpower your way into compassion. This is somatic work. This is nervous system work. This is the body learning, actually learning in its tissues that it's safe to feel and it's safe to stay present at the same time. So that is what we're doing when we tap. Not bypassing the turbulence, not performing peace, but just giving the body a signal that it's safe enough to soften, it's safe enough to stay. So we're going to move into the tapping portion. Meet me in part B whenever you're ready.